everybody. This is Jen Kleinhens.
And I'm Rob Those.
And you're listening to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, a podcast where we talk about our thoughts and opinions on marketing, from customer experience to brand and everything in between. Join us today as we talk to Charlotte Stewart, a marketing consultant in the art market. Formerly of the famous Christie's auction house, she now runs charlottestewartcreative.com.
So on this podcast, we like to get some guests that bring different perspectives, different angles, different industries, things that we maybe haven't experienced ourselves, that we would find interesting, and we think that our listeners would find interesting as well. And lucky enough to come across this person last year, and we were talking about the art market. Specifically, we were talking about Banksy at the time, but talking about the world of art, buying art, selling art, marketing art, an area I know literally nothing about. Thankfully, this person knows a lot about. So I would like to welcome to the podcast Charlotte Stewart. Welcome.
Hello.
It's lovely to have you here. Thank you very much for coming on. At the start of every interview, what we do is just a bit of a credibility thing, who you are, what your background is. So can you just give us a quick background as exactly that, who you are and what your background is, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a marketing consultant for the art market. I spent most of my early career, about 10 years at Christie's auction house, where I joined as a copywriter, but went on to do business management, content creation, most recently global marketing director for the decorative arts and private collections department. And for the last 3 to 4 years, I've been a consultant for a handful of clients who span from auction houses to private sale platforms and even some private collectors individually. And I specialize in the secondary art market.
Cool. I mean, that's a fascinating world. And again, something I know nothing about, having spent most of my career working in video games and working on McDonald's and things like that. One of the things that sort of strikes me is how different the marketing challenges must be in that world versus we've got 1 million of these to shift. How are we going to sell them? So in a world where I assume that a world that's built on kind of taste and scarcity as kind of key drivers, when you're at Christie's, how do you build a marketing plan? What do those challenges present to you in terms of marketing strategy? What are the key sort of things that you think would be different from that perspective?
Well, I think one of the major things, and this is very much particular to the secondary art market. So just to explain what the secondary art market is, so that was
going to be my next question.
so the primary art market is artwork that's purchased from the artist or the gallery or the studio and only enters the secondary market when it goes to be resold effectively. That's the most simple definition. And that's obviously an area for private sale, auction houses, and sort of collectors, institutions. And one of the biggest parts of marketing for the secondary art market is finding sellers. So I suppose that's not necessarily something that you would come across in every industry. And certainly with high net worth individuals at auction house, it's again, you kind of silo it down even more. You've got to find a group of people who not only have the wherewithal to actually transact at a certain level, but are interested enough to want to transact within a very small pool. So finding sellers is a huge part of what we do.
Gotcha.
At auction, it's called the consignment process. In the private sales market, it's called your network, basically. And I suppose also the other major challenge is, one, it's very cyclical. So, you buyers and sellers are often the same people. But there's also one of the major challenges is finding qualified buyers and sellers. So with the art world, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of people who want to engage in your content, want to engage with you, but they might not necessarily have the wherewithal to be able to actually transact with you.
Yeah, I haven't got the cash.
Yeah.
So in terms of sellers then, I imagine once you get to a certain point, there's a limited pool. So are you, from a competition perspective, are you competing with Sotheby's for the best stuff? Like when you were at Christie's, for example, was that you kind of...
Absolutely. So the kind of big 3/4 auction houses compete continually with each other around sellers. Once something's won, there isn't much competition as far as, buyers have got. Like, it's a done deal. A lot of that comes down to, a lot of it comes down to the deal offered by the auction house. It often also, and I would say more and more so, is also the marketing plan around that particular item that's going to be offered. And actually, there was a real sort of shift in that over sort of 10 years I was with Christie's, where clients used to be very, very interested in what deal they were going to get, what space it was going to get. The catalogue for auction houses is king and is still king, because you're essentially creating a bespoke book about someone's collection, particularly with private collections where it all belongs to one person. But certainly the shift to, more detailed questions from clients around what you're going to produce for them. And that's a really exciting time to be with auction houses, because they're not just fighting over the best commission rates anymore. They're fighting over what that auction house can do for that work of art.
It's almost like trade marketing. Like we used to do at Gamey, where with a video game publisher, where you're going to put us in your store and all that kind of stuff, but on a much, much grander scale.
Absolutely. And I think the landscape has become even more complicated because certainly in the last 10 years, these new businesses popping up being able to facilitate a sale as opposed to an auction house. The alternative to auction for masterworks at great value isn't something that 20 years ago you would have been able to find, and now it's everywhere. People are finding ways.
I would imagine, and again, I know nothing here, so tell me that I'm wrong, but I would imagine that the brand of Christie's, of Sotheby's, of those kind of big names, how important is that in the context?
So,
I know it sounds odd, but in a way you talk about the deal and the thing that you're going to get. But is in the world of like brand being a differentiator, how important is that brand, and how easy is it to kind of be distinctive, I guess, in that world? So
I would go as far to say that brand in the art market is more important than almost anywhere else.
Okay.
We did. I was this is just a little anecdote from Christie's days. We did a piece of discovery work around looking at focus groups who had the wherewithal, I keep using that expression, but basically the cash up front to be able to interact with us.
How do you recruit them? That's a question that suddenly pops into my mind.
You do it through an agency.
Right,
and
gotcha.
It's always fascinating to me, the people that pitch up at those things. But yeah, so discovery work around particularly people operating in the furniture market with the ability to spend over £250,000 a year on kitting out a new home. And what we found was, and these, absolutely, we were an anonymous client, so they were asked to talk around auction and how they felt about it. And the first thing that they said was, hang on, auction? What, why am I buying a piece from Selfridges for upward of £25,000, but I'm not comfortable buying at auction? Well, auction's a little bit dodgy, isn't it? You never really know what you're going to get. And then the invigilator brought up, okay, so what about brands like Christie's and Sotheby's? Oh, no, that's a different ballgame. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, you know what you're getting at Sotheby's. And it's very much that part of it. And that's something that the clients I work with now who slightly smaller auction houses than the big three, it's all about that position and that place in the auction marketplace, and particularly in London, there's a huge amount of competition at core level of auction marketplace.
Right.
But again, the thing that the big three, four struggle with is intimidation. These are also people within that discovery group who were happy. These are incredibly wealthy, incredibly confident in their own marketplace, who are absolutely terrified of going through the doors of a major auction house. And when asked why, the really honest ones of them said, well, I don't really know anything about art, and I don't really know anything about connoisseurship, and everyone there knows more than I do. And, that's a huge hurdle for brands like Christie's and Sotheby's. It's...
Okay. And so from a perspective of a marketing plan, so I want to split this into two bits. One is building the brand, not the Christies and something that need too much into they're a famous brand in their own right already. But then, do you have like a plan? Okay, this is what we're going to do from a overarching brand perspective, and then how in advance do you find out that there's something's coming up for sale? And therefore, how long do you have to market, say, a collection or a painting or whatever it might be? So how quickly does that happen?
Really, really key problem. Unlike anything else, this is age-old issue, and another reason why private sale platforms are becoming so much more successful. With an auction, you can look to consign a sale in the months prior to the consignment deadline. You're at it 100% of the time trying to find the lots that are going to be your star lots for that particular sale. Then you have a window of about a month to put the catalogue together. And once something's catalogued, it's in the sale. Otherwise, it has to be a withdrawn lot. So you've got a month to put the catalogue together, and then you have a month to market it. And then it all happens. So you've basically got about a window of a month. So you have to nurture people all the way up to the moment of the sale, but you can't really show them the goods. I mean, I often describe it as sort of you open up a big shop on a street, and you put all the posters out, and you put the campaigns together to make it all happen online, and then you go, I'm really sorry, but there's nothing on the shelves yet. But what's going to be on the shelves?
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing. I mean, the bonus they have is that the auction calendar is cyclical. So, there's certain seasons where stuff happens. So that's...
I was going to ask that. What causes that sort of seasonal effect? Is it just financial year ends or something, tax years?
I mean, it's a global seasonal auction calendar. And what you find is you have things like Asia Week, where all the sales take place in the space of a sort of week to 2 week period. And then you have 20th Century Week, where all the major auction houses hold their sales. And there's a sort of scrabble to the best dates.
Is that so that they can kind of consolidate from a marketing perspective in a way, or is it because it allows us to talk about this in very sort of discrete chunks?
So it used to be for the ease of collectors. The collectors would know at a specific time when everything was going to happen. I mean, there's also it's a little it helps to some degree because where the activity is going to be at the right time of year, and so it helps the market as well as the buyers and sellers sort of plan for the year ahead, really. But it also makes it more complicated because obviously the market is flooded for and particularly in the prints and editions market, that's great fun to watch because you've already got several versions of the same thing potentially going out to clients all at the same time. It's a complex part of it, but it's just how it's always worked.
And so when you get you've got a great collection coming up or particular thing that you think is going to work really well, what are the channels you're using to market to your is it marketing to your existing base? Do you also then go broader than that from sort of acquisition quote unquote perspective? What's the kind of what typical quote unquote, I mean that's probably a stupid thing to say, but what are the kind of channels that you're looking at?
Do you know, it's really hard to explain exactly. It's very hard to come up with one answer to that because, first of all, if you're talking about auction and something like Christie's or Sotheby's, remember, it's not all about contemporary art. It's not even about art necessarily. It's about everything from miniature snuff bottles or some of that Star Wars memorabilia that you've got behind you.
Not worth a huge amount, I wouldn't have thought. But anyway.
But one of my favourite parts of life at Christie's was working for pop culture department at Christie's South Ken. And the niche areas of Christie's South Ken, actually, which no longer exists. But, we're talking about a tiny group of people who, again, have an obsession. And collectors are extraordinarily brilliant, interesting people to work with. And it's my favourite part of what I do, is what makes a collector collect. Very different from what makes a buyer buy, in terms of talking about marketing psychology. If you're working with a very different, and obviously it's very different again in the investment print market, which has got nothing to do with art. at all and is purely to do with return.
It's a financial tool.
So I think I would say there's two ends of the spectrum. There's auction house collector base, where trying to find more of what you already know as your known client base is relatively unimportant. It's all about repeat nurture campaigns, talking to people, making sure they're still talking to you and they haven't found the newest, more exciting way to buy and sell elsewhere. And you might in those areas be talking to a handful of people. All the way to the other end of the spectrum, Banksy is a really good example, where you've got a huge untapped base of people who bought something back in 2002 for £50 and aren't aware that they're sitting on an absolute gold mine, and the only way you're going to grab them is through organic search, really. So it's not a kind of one answer, I'm afraid.
No, that's fair enough. I was just intrigued. So in the kind of the world that you're in now, from a sort of consulting perspective, and you're dealing with, you're not in Christie's, Sotheby's, $20 million paintings, whatever it might be, type stuff. You talked interestingly about sort of SEO being a key sort of tactic there. How has it changed? If you move down the value, I mean, obviously some of these prints are still pretty bloody pricey, but as you move down that value chain, how has that changed your marketing sort of strategy and plans?
Well, there's a key difference between marketing a masterwork, a masterpiece, and marketing prints and editions. But actually, the way, again, it goes back to trying to sell something that is a complete one-off, that a very small percentage of people can actually transact within. To core market works. I mean, we're still talking £45,000, for a Banksy print these days, at the very, very bottom, of the authenticated market. So it's not exactly somewhere that most people can transact at. So you're still talking to a very small pool of people. I think the thing that's quite exciting when you look at those two brackets is that auction is a gladiatorial forum. It's a space where, like, people who really enjoy it and repeat buy and sell, they enjoy the whole spectacle. They're never going to stop loving that. It's electrifying. Like, to be at an auction. I mean, telephone bidding in an auction is amazing because it feels like your money, even though it's not.
So have you've sat on calls and taken the bids and stuff?
Yeah, everyone at Christie's.
God, that must be amazing.
Everyone at Christie's does telephone bidding training, and then it's brilliant. And it's absolutely spine tingling. It's so fantastic, and that you're never going to be able to recreate that effect with a private sale. So a private sale being, you enter a piece of art to a dealer or a conduit, and they find a buyer. And I suppose the difference, and I'm talking quite specifically about the prints and multiples market against that masterpiece, is that auction works really well for masterpieces because there's only one shot at that piece of art. So, when you've got most
scarcity, everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, whereas in the prints and editions market, and this is where I think auction houses are struggling a lot, is that you want an unsigned turf war. Like, well, I mean, you can find another one if you don't want to bid again.
The supply is much greater, therefore the scarcity is lower. Therefore,
I mean, supply is still a problem, but it's nothing compared to buying,
one version of something.
Devolved Parliament, which is, the most expensive Banksy work ever sold. Like, that was always going to do better at auction than it was in private sale.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably more around the market in general than it is about marketing to them. But
so I've on a total tangent, I have to ask a question. But you talked about being on the phones. What's the two questions? What's the most expensive piece of art you've seen go live? And secondly, what's the most expensive thing that you can remember that you not bought for somebody, but bought on behalf of somebody at an auction?
So this isn't going to be as exciting as you hope it to be, because because I didn't ever do any evening sale bidding where you're talking millions and millions.
Okay.
But really exciting things that went. We used to have a sale, and this is to do with context as well as money. But we used to have a sale called the Out of the Ordinary sale.
All right.
Where we sold everything from like 1950s cyborg robots to the Aston Martin that James Bond drove in particular films. I mean, like, yeah, amazing. To Spitfires that were
sold a Spitfire.
Yeah. I mean, this is the wonderful world of auction. Like, this is the much more exciting part for me.
That's extraordinary.
Than the contemporary evening sales, because it's just the things that, the stories as well, you know, that come out.
Yeah.
And yeah, watching some of the characters that come in to bid on them as well, you know, and people. I remember we sold a diamond encrusted dog skeleton to
obviously.
Yeah, obviously. Swarovski encrusted dog skeleton to a client who'd never bought with Christie's before, and a number 10 London bus that was, I can't even recall now why it was so important, but to an anonymous, never seen before buyer who just came across it online, you know. So I mean, there's always things like that, and then there's always the fantastic social media stories about a pink diamond that went to a brand new client just because they saw it on Instagram. So you never really know where you're going to tap into people, but I think the major factor is trust. In the art world, that's probably more important than other industries.
Which I don't know if you've seen the documentary on Netflix. This is what was the actual? I forget the name of the documentary, but it was about an art gallery in New York that sold something like $80-something million worth of stuff that they couldn't validate, and that exactly brings out the point that you're talking about. This idea of trust is so important in this world. I can't imagine the provenance. Make sure this thing's actually bloody real.
You can't afford to get it wrong either. I mean, you know, there have been many examples, which we won't talk about, of people who've had businesses disappear overnight because one thing has turned out not to be right. And also, I think the other thing to know is that there's a huge amount of forgery and fakery involved in the market. And so it's, you know, people are skeptical, people are suspicious. You have to prove yourself and you have to have reputation. So I would say brand and reputation are, perhaps that's the same for all industries, but I think that without those things, you can't. And certainly when I first talk to a new client, that's one of the first things that we look at is how you're explaining yourself, because I think a lot of people are intimidated, whether they're very knowledgeable or not, quite frankly, about the market that they're about to transact within. And I think that messaging is key, because even if you have everything above board and you've got it all sorted, if you don't explain to your client how this works, because that's the other thing. It's about how people don't understand how auctions work. They don't understand how private sale works, and that puts a lot of people who might potentially want to, you know, perhaps the sort of, it's interesting looking at it in terms of other asset classes. People who are very comfortable in the stock market, but don't know the first thing about how they would do it within the art market. And certainly in the last year, that's been really interesting to watch, because you know, we've seen a lot of people who are sort of disillusioned by what they can get in other commodities, and so they're going, you know what? Actually, what about I buy a Banksy, because they seem to be doing rather well at the moment, you know. So yeah, it's changing all the time. It's changing all the time.
And one last thing before we move on, how has COVID affected? I mean, I imagine if you're peer to, how has it affected both at the grand end of obviously Sotheby's and Christie's, because you can't do auctions in person anymore, but also in terms of the other kind of ways of peer-to-peer, that kind of stuff. How's COVID affected it?
So there's a great quote by I think it was like the editorial assistant to the art newspaper as another auction, as another gallery door closes, a browser window opens.
That's a great phrase.
And I mean, it's literally been what's happened. I think it's been, so for auction, it's been the massive kick up the bum they needed for a really long time. You cannot just expect people to, oh no, but the clients no, they don't like it like that. Everybody needs convenience. So, and again, it's in what we have seen is a drop overall in masterpieces coming to auction during COVID, because if I've got a multi-million-pound Picasso, I'm just going to hold on to it for another year, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what we have seen boosted, if anything, by COVID is the prints and editions market. And obviously Banksy's gone absolutely bananas, which has been really fun to watch. And it's, I mean, the main things around Banksy, and I work with a client who specialises in Banksy prints and editions, is that Banksy's very easy to sell online, and to sell on the secondary market. Why, much to Banksy's disapproval, is because Pest Control, his authentication body, are so brilliant at making it impossible to forge a authentication certificate. So what you have is Banksy's being traded like chips, as long as they are backed up by a pest control certificate. And there's all sorts of great sort of ongoing stories around that market, but that's gone boom, because it can do, and because it suits that buying and selling market, and probably is a little bit of a reflection of money not being spent elsewhere in the market. At the same time, I think it's been really hard. It's been very difficult for primary art markets,
right?
For lots of reasons, but small galleries,
people can't get together, they can't see things, absolutely. Must be really difficult. So we like to kind of ask some different questions in this context, and one of the things you've obviously done, you've left Christie's and you've kind of gone out on your own and gone freelancer. I think a few years ago, was it a couple of years ago? I'm just intrigued, what was it that made you want to do that? What was it that made you decide, actually, do you know what, I'm going to go and do something different here?
I did it a bit by accident. I didn't unlike most people who go, I'm going to do this, and which I think is terrifying. I think, I often have people ask me for advice about it, and I'm just the worst person to give it, because I didn't have that moment of like, you know what, this is a risk. Let's put some cash aside and see if this works. I left. I've got 2 children, and I left Christie's at the end of my final maternity leave, and I decided that I would go and find a part-time role. And then the more and more people I spoke to, this question kept coming back, which was, could you just pop me a day rate? And I was like, oh God, okay. How do I come up with that? And then, what surprised me is that I haven't had to go out, and this is, I feel very lucky for, but I haven't had to go out and punt for work, pitch for work, because that's the other thing. And it's a sad thing, actually. And it's a great thing. The art world is very, very small, and very, very internal, incestuous. So most stuff comes through other people, and you get to sort of pick and choose what you want to do, which is great. But so that's really how it started. And then I was able to specialize in areas that I specialize in a bit more. I tend to say no to primary art market work, because it's not my expertise. No, I don't know how it works half as much as how it works between buyers and sellers that are sort of collectors. Yeah,
I think it's a universal thing. So when I set up Liquid CX not that long ago, somebody very smart who's also been a guest on this podcast, my old boss Simone in Australia, said the vast majority of the stuff that you get won't be through marketing yourself. It will be through connections or connections of connections.
Yeah.
And that's where most of the work will come from. That's been I think that, the other thing that I've learned is how long it takes for leads to come to fruition in terms of paid work. That's the thing that I found, is that people have a conversation. It sounds like it's going really well, and then nothing will happen for however long, and then it will circle back round again. It's an interesting bit. It's great that you've been able to build that. One of the things, unfortunately, when we do these interviews, because we are technically limited, Jen can't make the conversation sometimes. Well, she can, and then when she does, it sounds like she's a Dalek because of the way the setup happens. For those who listen in America, which is a big chunk of our audience, watch Doctor Who, you'll understand what a Dalek is. But she fired a question that I thought was really interesting, which was, what assumption do people have about the art world that's incorrect? What's the thing that people go, well, no, that's just not how it works?
I mean, it's a really good question. I think the first thing is how little people just don't know enough about the art world. They don't ask questions because they think that's going to make them sound like they don't know what they're talking about. I think a lot of people think that it's incredibly well paid and very glamorous.
I suppose they're anchoring to the sales price of.
I mean, I think
that's the fun.
I think particularly the sort of top end of auction world is marketed as a very glamorous, glossy role. And I think if you spoke to most people that worked there, you'd realise that, they've all changed light bulbs when something's gone wrong just ahead of an auction. They've all mucked in. And it is, and also, you don't go into the art world because you want to make a lot of money most of the time. You go in because you get to handle or talk about beautiful, amazing, interesting things. So it's not parties and glamour at all. It's a lot of hard work. And there's not, I think only a very small part of it is incredibly lucrative.
Right.
There's an awful lot that goes on that's not. I think that was probably the biggest.
Do you think that there is a kind of barriers to entry for people to getting into art? One is knowledge. Is there a kind of the elitism plays a part in certain ways as well? Do you think?
Massively. Yeah, we have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And that's something else that brands can do a lot with. So. Elitism is a massive problem for auction houses, and a lot of private sale platforms have really played on that, really played on we are the accessible art market. The Affordable Art Fair, that's a fantastic case study. The Affordable Art Fair, well, I mean,
define affordable.
It is relatively affordable. I think last time I looked, it was the most expensive thing could be £4,000, but I mean, when it started, that wasn't the idea. And I've always thought it'd be really fun to do it, the really affordable art fair, but which probably has already been done. But it's something that people play with a lot, that elitism.
Gotcha.
But people like it too. I mean, people like to be able to say, "Oh, that's a great painting. Oh yes, well we got it from Christie's 2 years ago." Everybody wants to say that. They don't want to say, "Oh yeah, it's by this artist." I mean, that's
I got it from IKEA.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, it's been fantastic talking to you. One last thing we always do what we call a shill section at the end of our interviews. So if there is anything you want to talk about, your website, who you are, how people can get in touch with you, any of that sort of stuff, now is your time, Charlotte.
Thank you. I'm contactable through my website, which is charlottestewartcreative.com. And I'm always happy to talk to anybody who has an interesting project. And my sort of skill set varies widely. So it's not all about contemporary art, even though that's probably what we've mostly talked about online today. But it's a very diverse area, and I'm always just fascinated by the next opportunity. So yeah.
Well, we'll make sure the link to your website is in the show notes as well, so anybody listening can go and check those out. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
So that's it for this episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand. We hope you enjoyed it. You can find show notes, resources, and more episodes on our website, everybodyhatesyourbrand.com. But before we go, we wanted to share an update on the future of the podcast. Now, very serious conversation. You might have noticed for the first 6 months or so of this podcast, we were releasing about once a week. However, we have some exciting news to share on the personal front that is going to impact the future of this podcast. So basically, it's both me and Rob, but I think from my perspective, I've recently moved into a new full-time role as a director of customer experience at Havas CX Helia in London. And, everybody knows a new role is always got to get a lot of your attention. And then on the side, I'm also running my behavioral science and customer experience website called choicehacking.com. So it's been very full on for the past 4 or 5 months for me.
And I have been have launched something called Liquid CX UK, which is essentially me as a brand I'm launching from a consulting, CRM, CX, loyalty consulting, and training brand. Basically trying to use my sort of 20 plus years experience across lots of different industries and agency side and client side and all those kind of good things to help other brands and companies sort of improve their abilities within those areas. Working with my old boss Simone Blakers, who runs Liquid CX in Australia,
and who was on this podcast.
We interviewed in this podcast, which you should go back and listen to because it's a good one.
That's a good one.
So yeah, but we do still love doing the podcast, and we do still love doing the interviews. As I think the one we just did with Charlotte was really, really informative. So the plan is to carry on doing the podcast, but be more predictable in the sense of trying to do it at least twice a month rather than every week, because every week isn't feasible for us right now.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, the bandwidth is short and delegated to many areas, but we want to keep doing the podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we do love doing the podcast. I think we've heard so many supportive things from all over the globe.
Yes.
Just so many subscribers and things that we never thought would really happen with the podcast. So we do want to keep doing it, but I just think, both Rob and I, at least for the foreseeable future, for the next few months, we do want to kind of downshift a little bit the schedule, because if you've ever done a podcast or thought about doing a podcast, it's really fun, but it's also demanding.
It's a lot, and I think
can be a lot.
But what I will say is we've already got a couple more interviews lined up.
Yes.
That are really interesting conversations, and we're always thinking of new topics to talk about. So, we committed to doing, I think, 50 odd of these, didn't we? As an initial,
at least.
As initial stab.
At least.
And we're only on episode 27. Mm-hmm. So there is plenty more to come from us. We just wanted to set expectations that it might not be every week as it was previously. If we do more than 2 a month, we have some great ideas, we have the time, then so be it. But 2 a month is kind of what we're aiming for.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your support, everybody. We really appreciate it. And we hope to continue the podcast for many years to come. But like we said, I think for us to preserve our sanity as well as the podcast itself, we're going to change the schedule up a little bit.
Absolutely.
Well, you did it. You've wasted another perfectly good half an hour or so with Rob and Jen and the Everybody Hates Your Brand podcast. Again, you can find us on everybodyhatesyourbrand.com and your podcast platform of choice. Have a week.
Take great care and be vigilant.